As I stared at my reflection in the vintage full-length mirror, I was supposed to feel like a princess, but something was off. My name is Kate, a 28-year-old woman who had always been fiercely independent. I had a stable job, great friends, and now I was about to marry Mark, the man I had been dating for 2 years. He was a charming, good-looking man, and when he proposed, I thought I had hit the jackpot. But even on this most significant day, I couldn't ignore the warning signs that had been subtly surfacing over the last few months of our engagement. I was in the bridal suite, surrounded by flowers, champagne, and my bridesmaids. Sarah, my best friend, handed me a glass of bubbly. "You look stunning, Kate. Mark won't know what hit him." "I hope so," I muttered, taking a sip. Just then, the door creaked open, and Gloria, Mark's mother, waltzed in like she owned the place. This woman was a force to be reckoned with, impeccably dressed and meticulously groomed, but her eyes were always cold, like those of a shark circling its prey. "Kate, can we talk?" she said, feigning a smile. "Of course, Gloria. What's up?" I asked, setting down my glass of champagne. "Darling, are you sure about this dress? It's just that it makes you look, well, rather plump," Gloria sneered. "Excuse me," I said, a lump forming in my throat. Before I could say anything else, Mark entered the room. I looked at him, desperate for a partner to take my side. He was scrolling through his phone, seemingly disinterested in the room's palpable tension. "Mark, your mother thinks I look fat in this dress. Do you agree?" I asked, my voice tinged with vulnerability. Mark glanced up from his phone, eyed me briefly, and shrugged. "You look fine, Kate. Don't worry about it." "Fine," I snapped. "It's our wedding day, and all you can say is that I look fine?" Gloria chimed in. Now, no need to make a scene. Mark is just not one to exaggerate. Fine is good." I clenched my fists. I felt like I was drowning, and the two people who should have been my lifelines were tossing me anvils instead. I wanted to cry, to shout, to run away, but I was paralyzed. And deep down, I was starting to realize that my happiest day had unveiled some painful truths I couldn't ignore anymore. "Let's just get this over with," I said, plastering on a smile as I picked up my bouquet. As we walked down the aisle and I saw Mark standing there, something inside me was screaming that I was making a huge mistake. But it was too late. The guests were all seated, the organ was playing, and all eyes were on me. There was no turning back now. That was the beginning of a journey that would test me in ways I had never imagined. As I said, "I do," my gut churned, warning me that these vows would bind me to much more than just a husband. They were shackling me to a nightmare that was only just beginning. The irony was not lost on me. Here I was, promising to love and cherish till death do us part, unaware that the most significant battle of my life was looming on the horizon. But one thing was clear as I looked into Mark's dispassionate eyes and Gloria's smug face. This was a battle I had to fight, even if I had to do it alone. Moving into my house after the wedding was supposed to be a fresh start. A quaint 2-bedroom home filled with memories of my independence, it was a sanctuary I had built brick by brick. From the hand-picked vintage furniture to the framed photographs that lined the walls, this was my space, my sanctuary. And so, with hope that married life would be an added layer of happiness, I welcomed Mark into it. Little did I know, I was also unwittingly opening the door to my own hell. Gloria's visits started out innocuously enough. She'd pop by with her famous apple pie or offer to help with the garden. But each visit became an intrusive inspection, where every corner of my house was scrutinized, every decision I made for the home belittled. "I have to say, Kate, your taste in furniture is eclectic," Gloria commented one afternoon as she sat on my vintage armchair, eyeing it like it was a piece of trash. "It's mid-century modern, Gloria. Some people appreciate its aesthetic," I retorted, trying to maintain my cool. "Ah, some people. Well, we all have our little oddities, don't we?" she replied, unfazed. Mark, sitting beside her, chortled at his mother's snide remarks. "Mom's got a point, Kate. Why don't we redo the living room? Fresh start, you know?" My heart sank. I looked at Mark, then at Gloria, and I realized that in my own home, I was outnumbered. But nothing prepared me for the day Gloria arrived with her suitcases. Yes, suitcases, plural. I heard the doorbell ring and opened the door to find her standing there, luggage in tow. A false smile was plastered across her face, but her eyes had that familiar predatory glint. "I've decided to move in," she announced, as if she were bestowing some great honor upon us. I was flabbergasted. "Move in? That's out of the question." Mark walked in from the kitchen, likely sensing the tension. "What's going on here?" "Your mother wants to live with us, Mark. Tell her it's not possible," I pleaded. Mark turned to me, and for a moment I saw a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes, but it was quickly replaced by a look of resignation. "Kate, she's my mother. She's getting older and she doesn't want to live alone. What's wrong with her staying with us?" "You can't be serious," I said, my voice tinged with disbelief and desperation. "This is our home, Mark. Home is where family is, Kate. And she's family," Mark retorted. And just like that, I was overruled. My sanctuary was invaded, and there was nothing I could do to reclaim it. Gloria strutted into the house, her face beaming with a triumph that chilled me to the bone. As she passed by me, she whispered in my ear, "Get used to it, darling." The walls of my own home started to close in on me. I had been so blinded by love, or what I thought was love, that I hadn't seen the quicksand I was sinking into. As Gloria began unpacking her things and filling up space that was once mine, I had to accept the bitter truth. I was no longer the queen of my castle. I was an outsider, isolated and outnumbered. That night, as I lay in bed next to a snoring Mark, I replayed the day's events in my mind. This was more than a failed attempt to set boundaries. This was a hostile takeover of my life. With each ticking second, I felt more trapped, but also, oddly, more resolute. If this was war, I was not going down without a fight. It was a terrifying thought, yet it was the only thing that allowed me to close my eyes and brace myself for the struggles that lay ahead. It didn't take long for my home to transform into a battlefield. Under Gloria's watchful eye, my days became a series of endless chores and impossible tasks. My sanctuary had become a prison, and she, the warden. It was as if she'd made it her personal mission to break my spirit, piece by piece, and the worst part was that Mark seemed completely oblivious to my suffering. Or worse, he was willingly blind to it. Every morning started the same way. Gloria would prepare an elaborate list of chores for me to complete, items ranging from scrubbing the floors to reorganizing the entire pantry, her handwriting a loopy scrawl that might as well have spelled out "do my bidding." "Kate, I hope it's not too much to ask, but could you make sure these are done by the afternoon? You know how I like to keep a neat house," she'd say, handing me the paper as if it were some kind of royal decree. "And what will you be doing while I work my fingers to the bone?" I'd ask, trying to conceal the resentment in my voice. "Oh, someone needs to supervise, dear. And well, that's naturally my job as the elder in this household," she'd reply, a smirk etched on her face. What's going on here? Mark would wander into the conversation, usually engrossed in his phone or some other distraction. "Your mother has a list of chores she wants me to complete." I'd tell him, hopeful that for once he'd take my side. "Well, Mom knows best when it comes to running a household, doesn't she?" was all he'd say before sauntering off, leaving me defeated and frustrated. One particular incident sealed my resolve that something had to change. Mark and I were invited to a party hosted by my longtime friend, Jenny. I thought it would be a brief respite from the torment at home, a night where I could relax and forget about the tension that had gripped my life. For the first hour or so, everything was great. We mingled, laughed, and I started to feel like my old self again. But as the night wore on, Mark became increasingly distant. He was downing drinks like there was no tomorrow, and his eyes began wandering. Then he disappeared. Confused and concerned, I searched for him throughout the house. Finally, behind a closed door, I heard laughter and hushed voices. My heart sank as I opened the door to find Mark in the arms of another woman, both looking decidedly disheveled. "What the hell, Mark?" I screamed, unable to contain my horror and humiliation. "Kate, it's not what it looks like," he stammered, suddenly sobering up at the gravity of the situation. "Not what it looks like. You're cheating on me, in public, among my friends." I was shaking with fury. "It's your fault. You've been so distant, so preoccupied with Mom," he retorted, as if that justified his betrayal. I felt a slap land across my cheek before I even saw his hand move. The room went silent, the only sound my own heart pounding in my ears. I was in utter disbelief, shocked that the man I had married, who lived under the same roof as me, could become such a stranger. I didn't say a word. I simply turned, left the party, and ran home, tears streaming down my face. But as I did, I made myself a promise. No matter what it took, I was going to reclaim my life and my dignity. I was done being the victim. In that moment, fueled by betrayal and indignation, the seeds of my rebellion were sown. Little did they know, their reign of torment was about to come crashing down, and I would be the one to pull the lever. The air was thick with tension when I got home that night, the events of the party hanging over me like a dark cloud. As I entered, I found Gloria sitting at the dining table, a smirk decorating her face as if she knew some delicious secret. It turned my stomach. Mark was there too, avoiding eye contact, busying himself with his phone. "Kate, dear, how was the party?" Gloria asked, feigning sweetness but oozing insincerity. "You've returned quite early." Ignoring her, I took a deep breath and turned to Mark. "We need to talk. What happened tonight was unacceptable." Mark finally looked up from his phone, locking eyes with me for a brief moment before turning to his mother. "Mom, could you please give us some privacy?" Gloria pretended to look surprised. "Oh, but why? We're all family here, aren't we?" Ignoring her, I reiterated, "Mark, we need to talk. Alone." With a sigh of resignation, Mark stood up. "Fine, let's go to the bedroom." Once we were in the privacy of our room, I mustered all the courage I had left to confront him. "Mark, you cheated on me, and you slapped me. Do you have any idea how demeaning that is?" His eyes flickered, a momentary lapse that indicated he was still capable of feeling guilt. "I was drunk, Kate. It's complicated." "Complicated? This isn't just about tonight, Mark. Ever since your mother moved in, our marriage has deteriorated. I've become a servant in my own house, and you've allowed it." Mark shook his head, exasperated. "You're blaming my mother for this? You're just looking for a scapegoat for your own failings as a wife." I was stunned at his audacity. "My own failings. I've tried to be accommodating even with your mother's constant interference and belittling. But I can't live like this. Something has to change." Before Mark could respond, Gloria burst into the room, unable to contain her glee. "Oh, what's this? Trouble in paradise?" That was the last straw. "Get out of my room, Gloria. In fact, get out of my life," I yelled, my voice echoing off the walls. Mark jumped up, furious. "How dare you speak to my mother like that? I should have never let you into this house." I stood there, incredulous. It was as if the scales had finally fallen from my eyes. I looked at Mark, then at Gloria, and realized the awful truth. These people, my so-called family, were my tormentors. They would never change. And that meant I had to. "In that case, you should leave. Both of you," I declared, my voice unwavering. Gloria erupted in laughter. "You can't be serious. Where would we go?" "You should have thought of that before turning my life into a living hell," I retorted. Suddenly, Gloria's expression changed, her eyes narrowing. "You'll regret this, Kate. You don't know who you're messing with." I looked at her, then at Mark, who stood there, a silent spectator in this twisted drama. "No, you don't know who you're messing with," I said, "and you're about to find out." As they exited the room, the weight of what had just transpired hit me. This wasn't just the end of a chapter. It was the end of an entire book, one filled with deceit, betrayal, and torment. A book that I was more than ready to close. As the door clicked shut behind them, I knew that the battle had only just begun. But now I was ready. For the first time, I felt armed and dangerous, fueled by an adrenaline rush of newfound courage and self-respect. It was high time for the unveiling, a revelation that would turn their world upside down, and I couldn't wait to lift the curtain. The next morning, I woke up with a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years. I called my brother Tom, who happened to be a skilled lawyer, and briefed him on the entire situation. He assured me we had a strong case for divorce and suggested gathering evidence against Gloria for emotional abuse and defamation. We got to work immediately. A couple of weeks later, Gloria committed the fatal mistake that would mark the beginning of her downfall. During one of her regular visits, she inexplicably called the police, accusing me of cheating on Mark and stealing $300,000 from a safe we didn't even have. "Officers, you must arrest this woman. She has ruined our family and stolen from us," Gloria dramatically exclaimed as the police arrived. Shocked but calm, I looked the officers in the eyes. "I don't know what she's talking about. We don't even have a safe, and these accusations are absurd." Mark, pale and conflicted, hesitated before speaking. "Mom, what are you doing?" "This is for the best, you'll see," she replied, winking at him as if they shared some dark secret. The officers were skeptical, but proceeded to question us separately. They quickly realized Gloria's story had too many holes to be credible. As they left, one officer pulled me aside. "You might want to sort this out legally, ma'am. These are serious accusations." "Thank you, officer. I intend to," I responded, my eyes meeting Gloria's. Her face was a blend of rage and apprehension, realizing she had overplayed her hand. Within days, Tom had all the evidence we needed. Surveillance footage showed Gloria planting money in my car, intending to frame me for theft. Text messages between her and a mysterious contact hinted at a calculated plan to destroy my reputation. And Mark, when faced with the overwhelming evidence, had no choice but to cooperate. "The court is now in session," the judge announced, signaling the beginning of the trial that would forever change our lives. Gloria, seated beside her low-rent lawyer, glared at me across the room. I sat next to Tom, confident and prepared. "Your Honor, we have irrefutable evidence that my client has been falsely accused by Mrs. Gloria Thompson," Tom stated, presenting the evidence meticulously. The judge reviewed the files and turned to Gloria. "Mrs. Thompson, do you have anything to say in your defense?" She stuttered, visibly unnerved. "Well, it has," the judge said sternly. "I find in favor of Mrs. Kate Thompson. Mrs. Gloria Thompson is hereby ordered to pay a fine of $100,000 for defamation and emotional abuse. And what about our marriage?" Mark suddenly spoke up, realizing his future was also on the line. I looked at him coldly. "Your Honor, I'd also like to file for divorce on grounds of adultery and emotional neglect." Tom presented photographic evidence of Mark's indiscretion, leaving no room for denial. "Very well," the judge said. "Divorce granted. Mrs. Kate Thompson, you are entitled to full ownership of your marital home and assets, as they were primarily under your name to begin with." As the gavel struck, sealing their fates, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. I turned to look at Gloria and Mark one last time. Their faces were etched with the realization that they had lost everything, and it was all their own doing. As I walked out of the courtroom, Tom hugged me tightly. "You did it, sis. You're free." I smiled, savoring the moment. "No, Tom, we did it. And yes, I am free. Free from their torment, free from their lies, and most importantly, free to live my life on my own terms." The downfall was complete. I had won the battle and the war. But this was more than just a victory. It was a rebirth, a chance to reclaim my life and my identity. And I had every intention of making the most of it My newfound freedom had given me wings. I sold the house that had become a prison, seeking a fresh start in a new place. But before I turned that page, there was one more thing to do. As part of the divorce settlement, Gloria was obligated to pay me $100,000 in damages. She had no way to pay up except to sell her own house, which, as it turned out, was also where Mark had moved back to. I had a meeting set up with her to finalize the payment, and for this encounter, I enlisted Tom to accompany me. We arrived at what used to be the opulent residence of Gloria and found it in a state of disarray, a reflection of her disrupted life. The door creaked open and there stood Gloria, a shell of her former self. "Kate, Tom," she mumbled, her voice devoid of its earlier venom. We took seats in the living room, which was cluttered with boxes. Mark was conspicuously absent, likely too embarrassed to face me. Gloria pulled out a checkbook, her hand trembling as she wrote. "Here it is, the final payment," she said, handing me a check for $100,000. Her eyes met mine, searching for a shred of sympathy. "Thank you," I replied, my voice cool and detached. Tom scrutinized it briefly before nodding. "It's all in order. Is this it, then? Are we done?" Gloria asked, a mix of relief and despair in her voice. I took a deep breath, contemplating my next words carefully. "No, we're not done, Gloria. Money can't erase the harm you've done. But here's something you should know. Your actions have consequences far beyond this check or even this house." Gloria looked up, puzzled and alarmed. "You see," I continued, "I've recently made some investments in a prominent online publication, and they are very interested in stories that empower women. Stories about overcoming abuse and harassment. I've already shared my experiences, and they will be published in detail." Her eyes widened, realizing the implication. "You can't do that. That's a breach of privacy." "No, it's called freedom of speech," Tom interjected, "and everything she says will be factual. And let's not forget the various support groups and forums where women share their stories to warn others about people like you," I added, leaning in. "Your name, Gloria, will be synonymous with deception and cruelty. You won't be able to so much as rent an apartment without someone Googling your name and finding out exactly who you are." For the first time, I saw genuine fear creep into Gloria's eyes. "As for you, Mark," I said, raising my voice so he could hear me wherever he was hiding, "I hope the women you meet in the future are smart enough to stay away once they read our story. You're going to have a hard time maintaining any relationship." I stood up, feeling an immense weight lift off my shoulders. "Goodbye, Gloria. I wish I could say it's been nice knowing you." As Tom and I exited the house, I felt a sense of closure I hadn't thought possible. The chapter was finally closed, the last page turned. Retribution was complete, not in the form of revenge, but in the unmasking of the truth. As we drove away, I looked at Tom. "Thank you for being there, for believing in me." Tom smiled. "You're my sister. Where else would I be?" And as the house disappeared from the rearview mirror, I felt more than just the physical distance growing between me and my past. I felt the reclaiming of my life, my soul, and my future. I was no longer just Kate, the victim. I was Kate, the survivor, the warrior, and the woman who would not be silenced. I had my voice back, and I intended to use it not just for myself, but for everyone who had ever felt oppressed. It was a new beginning, and I was ready.